Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Leela Karbasi. I'm the Chief of Programs at the United Nations Global Compact. We're pleased to host today's webinar together with the UN Secretary General's team, Sustainable Energy for All and Women Business. The Secretary General is convening the UN Climate Action Summit, calling on all heads of states and leaders to come to New York with concrete plans and solutions on climate change. This comes at a really important moment. Global heating is on the rise, and despite the historic achievement of the Paris Agreement, we're lagging behind in taking actions to address climate change. This would not happen without the private sector. Governments need your support. Bold business leadership supports bold policy action, and vice versa. This is what we call an ambition loop. The summit is being designed to drive transformative change in key sectors and systems around 9 action areas that will drive ambition and innovation. Energy transition is a major part of driving this transformation. On the business side, we've seen some great progress already, uptakes of initiatives like RE100, EP100, and a growing movement of high-emitting sectors that are setting science-based targets. Investors are also part of the equation. Through Climate Action 100+, they're asking the highest emitting companies to be part of the clean energy transition and disclose actions. This momentum is encouraging, but we're far from reaching our target of limiting global heating to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that's why we need all of your support and leadership to create the tipping points that are necessary to turn this around. Today, you will hear how business can ramp up ambition and get involved in driving this agenda forward. Here with us today, we have Julia Penzer. She's from the Secretary General's team on climate change, George Hampton, Senior Advisor at Sustainable Energy for All, and Mike Pierce, Corporate Partnerships Director at the Climate Group. After hearing from them, we will open to a Q&A session, so please use the Q&A feature on the platform and get your questions throughout the webinar. So I'm now pleased to hand over to George Hampton of Sustainable Energy for All. He will start introducing the energy transition track.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lily. It's wonderful to be on the call with everyone, and thank you very much for the Global Compact and others for setting this up. Probably two points before I start, just very quickly. So my boss is the Special Representative for Sustainable Energy for All, Rachel Kite, who many of you may know. And also just to note that I'll try and go slowly. My accent is somewhat annoying. It's a New Zealand accent, which perhaps is even worse if you're Australian. But just quickly to go through the slides here. First off, the science is clear on climate, and I know when we're talking to a community of businesses associated with the compact that that is even more clear to you. But the leadership isn't, and I think this is what this summit is about. We put a slide up of the top 10 risks from WEF, and of those top 10, many 70% of them relate to climate. So the SG has stated his intention that this is a race that must be won, but it's also a race that we know we can win. Reports like Mission Possible have laid out for business, in particular for industry and hard to abate sectors, that while it's a difficult challenge, it is possible for business and industry to step up and make the commitments in line with 1.5 and to bring business along and to bring the world economy along to meet the climate goals. But we also know that it doesn't happen just as a result of high-level will. It requires individuals to make an effort. Both individuals in your communities, but also people acting in business and seeing the bigger picture and making sure that we can all move forward. As the private sector, you have a very specific and important role, and we know that you know it's possible and that we have your support. what today is about is looking beyond the technology, where we think, I think for the most part, the technology is there, where we have the technology to be able to achieve this goal. But it's really a question of will for the most part. So going on to the climate summit itself, the intention of the summit is that on the 23rd of September this year, the Secretary General is bringing together a hybrid summit. This is unusual in the UN system. Normally, UN summits are a result of member states getting together to have one of these initiatives. This one is unusual in that the Secretary General is inviting world leaders to this summit, pulling together heads of state, government, and also leaders from outside of national states as well, which is in part where you come in, as well as youth and civil society, given the impact and growth of activism over the last couple of years. And then further from the UN system itself. As I say, the summit will take place on the 23rd of September, kicking off the high-level week at the United Nations. And then there will be a range of other activities on that week at the UN as well, including other smaller summits, or equally important, but other summits around sustainable growth, sustainable development rather, and financing for development. The aim of the summit, as Lily mentioned early on, is to try and raise ambition. And this is aiming at the October 1.5 degree goal of the IPCC report. And collectively, the objective is to demonstrate a leap in national political ambition and internationally, and to show a massive acceleration of action and progress towards zero carbon in the real economy. To do this, the SG asks that countries and businesses and people come to the summit with a plan, not a speech. While it is a summit, it's more a process of rallying all of us together and all stakeholders to take action. There's going to be a preparatory meeting at the end of June in Abu Dhabi, and then efforts that go to that meeting then will then be selected to be taken to the summit itself in September. And finally, the weekend before the summit, there'll be a series of activities leading up to the summit to try and encourage more ambition and action. Julia?
I'm Julia Panzer. I'm working in the Secretary General's office on the climate summit, specifically on the energy transition team. We're two colleagues that are leading that work stream from the inside, so to say. And since it's all about action, we have mobilized around these 9 action areas, which are kind of like working groups looking at what has to be done, again, not in terms of technology, of course we know that's there, but how to make that happen, how to implement it, how to get countries and business leaders to commit to really move that change before we are being moved from our planetary boundaries that when we see shifting here. So we know that on the energy track in which we dive in today, we have a couple of cross-cutting issues. You might think, well, energy, of course, is related to industry, is related to cities, the youth, the social political drivers, mitigation strategy, that's all cross-cutting. So we're also making sure here on the inside in the Secretary General's office to link up these different streams. But it's really much more, and I think you can see that than a summit. It's not about so much who's coming to the summit with a speech, as said before, but with a plan, and that we need to identify going forward now to Abu Dhabi and then to the summit itself. The direction and the mandate that I can say here from the inside is really clear, and you might have seen just the latest speech today where the Secretary General is in Vienna at the R20 cities meeting in local governments. It's really about everybody right now to chip in, and it's not just about something we've been doing before, but the line, if you look at what in diplomacy terms our colleagues are saying right now about tax pollution, not people, stop subsidies to fossil fuels, and stop building new coal plants by 2020. That's very strong messages, and that's what we mean. So that's why, if you see on the second slide, we have actually for each stream, we have co-leading countries that have said, well, we're going to spearhead that, we're going to move this area forward. In our case, we have Denmark and Ethiopia as the ones in the core group working with George, Rachel Kite in SE4All, and together with us in the Secretariat to move this area forward. As a second lever, we then have the country members that have said, well, for us as well, this is such an important topic. We need to move certain things forward. So they could take on different substreams in the big area of energy. And we will go a little bit more into that, what that means in our work plan. And then we, of course, have partners and stakeholders that come in with analysis and so on, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. This year is about taking all the knowledge that we already have and the reports, and is it really the way that we have to do? No, we know that we have to do it. And now it's about how we're going to do this. So concrete plans again. It doesn't mean that this coalition is closed. So you might now think, oh, I'm headquartered in a different country, or I don't have any affiliation with A, B, or C country, but that's actually not the case. These are the countries that are moving forward, but that also doesn't mean that another country can commit under the energy track to a certain deliverable. So we would actually encourage all of you to have also a conversation with your government where your headquarters or have strong cooperation with already, to see how can they engage and make sure that we deliver on the energy transition track. Why energy? You probably don't ask yourself that, but handing over to George on why and how we're going to do this.
Yes, I mean, I think, as you say, people probably don't ask themselves that, or wake themselves up in the morning asking it. But for us, it's pretty obvious, which is that energy and the energy sector is connected, or is intimately connected to any effort to reduce and mitigate climate change. Energy accounts for 2/3 of total greenhouse emissions, something around 80% of CO2 emissions, according to the IEA. At the same time, we also know that energy efficiency measures also play an incredibly important role in reducing CO2 emissions. Again, something around 44% of emissions would need to come from energy efficiency, so demand side measures. And then something like 36% of the needed CO2 emissions would need to come from a switch to renewables. So there's kind of a two-sided coin here, and energy plays a critical part on both sides. So going further, why are we looking at energy demand and supply? We're looking at it in part in sort of two columns. One, we've got on this slide the Paris goal targets, and then we've got the SDG 7 targets. It's estimated as of the information that came out this week tracking SDG 7 that roughly 840 million people around the world still live without electricity. Getting these 800 million people on the grid in the same unsustainable way that we look to get people on the grid today, or have in the past, will jeopardize our climate. In order to meet SDG 7 and not lose sight of keeping temperatures within the 2 degrees radius, or 1.5 degree target, we need to bring those 840 million people along with us and make sure that they are brought along in a sustainable way. We also know that to do this and to achieve the goals of Paris as well, we need to support public and private sector action, which is why the Energy Transition Coalition has been formed. Part of our focus has been around the financing piece of the equation. As I said before, we think in order to achieve a large part of these goals, much of the technology is already behind us. But the financing side is not such a clear picture, which we'll touch back on soon. But accordingly, we're looking as well to increasing demand from new energy customers as we would provide further energy services under SDG 7. Julia?
Yes, thanks, George. So the question then is, well, what are we going to do? And if you look at the work plan that is also online and that we actually intend to update it all around every 2 weeks, so you will find updates there if you check back to kind of track along in a very transparent way our work, which again is a very new way of kind of moving really together towards this summit, which is seen, I think, in the private sector's kind of lingo would be much more like a milestone, a collection, a deadline. So it's not like like we kind of rock up in September and come with a speech that we kind of recycle from 2014. No, we're actually working right now already to make sure that we have the right plans together with the governments and the private sector as well together, and not just, well, joining in September thinking like, well, this is an easy piece of cake. It is not, and I think that's also the realization. We know that it is not easy, but it's doable if we put our minds to it and our will to it. So today we have many national strategies that set out NDCs, and that's of course a good step. But we also know that the focus on renewables and energy efficiency, when you look at the two sides of the energy side, have to step up and also to become much more concrete in terms of policy work and to leverage finance, which we're lacking behind. That's clear. We also know technology is there, but we need to find these kind of levers where we can find these crossroads between the SDG 7, as George explained, and our energy sectors. And therefore, we have put together these 4 areas where we need to see, and those are maybe a little bit more political for your taste, but that's the ones where we need to do something around. So that's, of course, the investment part, the mobilizing around clean energy investment and policy for that sense. So how to increase the action and the implementation of solutions today, 2020, 2023, 2030 already. And we know, of course, the end goal is 2050, but anyone who knows 2050 also needs that we have to have some backward planning. So some concrete examples of what we are looking for under this deliverable could be a commitment by public and private, and that's clear that has to come together to increase the clean investment, supporting some financing mechanisms, and so forth, some models to say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to put also some money behind. One of our permanent representatives of one of our coalition countries recently said, well, if the country's not coming with a checkbook almost, then there's no space on this summit stage. That's very much a different language, much stronger as what we used to. The second point is, of course, public-private partnerships. I mean, that's pretty clear, but what does it mean, right? It can't be just that we sign up to something nice and show a nice website or something. There needs to be action on the ground, pipes in the ground, so to say. So what are we looking here? We're looking again for an outcome that's demonstrating the proof of concept that it's possible, but going way beyond lighthouse projects. So it could be that a country comes up with saying, well, I'm going to increase my sectorial NDC specifically on efficiency, for instance, example of buildings or something like that. And then we have someone from the private sector helping to make that happen and give the confidence as well that that's possible. And politicians are not just signing up to a goal that's not achievable, where then they leave behind the society that is tracking that. And it's the focus right now is very high, as we've seen in the recent European elections. So then challenging sectors, that's the other part. We know there are certain sectors, and it becomes very clear when you listen to the Secretary General these days. Clearly, we need to something around oil and gas and coal, but then there's also demand side areas like shipping, like cooling, and so on, that we need to see some action on. So here, commitment could, again, both from private and public sector, be to build something together, to step that up, to make a concrete NDC and a plan behind that. And then finally, and of course very importantly, the part of the leaving no one behind. So here we have to address the 850 or 840 million people that we know need access. What can we commit here? And in the next slide, we will show you a little bit more concrete what we're working with and where you might also want to chip in and join the coalition. Over to you, George.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so if we go to this next slide, we've just provided a little more detail here on some of what we're trying to deliver, or some of what's come through so far. As Julia sort of said before, so far we've had, I think, something around 80 concrete proposals come from various institutions, countries, companies, and clusters of institutions, countries, and companies. As you can see from our slide here, they've kind of fitted into these four boxes. Just going through some of these very quickly. So, for example, on decluttering of the energy finance space. So for us, this goes to a supply side problem in part, which is that there are currently over 70 funds or preparation facilities for energy financing. And it's a particularly complicated proliferation of entities for developing countries to govern to get to the point where they can finance energy projects within their countries. There's a mention there of a government toolbox. This is going to the enabling conditions that exist within countries, and can we unite countries around what it means to have a good, clear sense of what enabling conditions are and what support can be provided to governments to provide those enabling conditions. We've got some mentions of technology there as well as in going into the next part, which is around action-oriented partnerships to help deliver these commitments and to help increase the level of ambition NDCs within national determined contributions under the Paris Agreement that member states make. Here, an example is the energy efficiency NDC partnership, which would be a coming together of organizations that support energy efficiency to support a number of countries to take forward energy efficiency pledges in their NDCs. Another potential commitment here is around the IT sector. One part of that is can further moves be taken in the IT sector to enhance the efficiency of large-scale and medium-scale servers and data centers. At the same time, what more of a role can the IT sector, can tech play around energy and climate, including around data and transparency, and helping in part to drive personal efficiency and awareness of energy consumption, but also then to bigger ideas around AI and blockchain and others. Julie, do you want to give some more examples? Julia, I think you're muted, unfortunately.
Oh, yes, thanks. If we move over to the bucket here on challenging sectors, then you can see things around the alternative to coal. So on the supply side, we got some proposals around what we can do there in terms of methane leakage, hydrogen, other solutions, energy storage. So we're exploring together with utilities already, member states, what a sustainable pathway could look like, and what could be commitments that people would be able to come to the summit with, but also again with the plan, not just saying to do it, but showing that we're already moving into that direction. Another area would be shipping, where we know the industry is already very active. But again, we're talking here, and most of you are probably leaders in your space, and that's great. I mean, you have your own targets and you're working on that. But now we're coming to the second phase, where we also need to get companies in private sector, the second tier, on board to say, well, here we're providing leadership. This is a blueprint of how we can do it. And then together, and again, this ambition loop with countries and governments to make sure that we get actually everybody on board, because we need everybody. So in the shipping space, that's one of the areas we look at. And then on the leaving no one behind, we have, we're thinking about, well, a couple of countries that would commit to an amount of the population by a certain year to give access, and specifically here you see the example of cooling, which is a means to ensure that, because we know that once there's a grid solution, once people get on the electricity grid, they would buy some kind of a cooling solution. But here again, SDG 7 versus climate, we need to combine these, because once these people get on the grid, if they buy maybe solutions that are not up to date, because they're not available to price or other reasons, then we jeopardize our goals overall for the planet. So this could be, of course, again, countries and organizations to chip in there, and then you would see the normal what we have here, of course, as well, clean cooking and these areas that are also just lacking far behind, as you can read up in the current tracking report. So we've received a lot of proposals, but if you see yourself as leading here and wanting to chip in, this is your overview that you also find online, and we just posted in the comment box the link to the work plan that is updated all the time, and look into, think about how you can move these areas forward to make sure we move.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to intervene on that last point, which is just to say that what we've been trying to have companies and institutions and countries focus in on is really, what does your company do well on energy? Where are you a leader, or perhaps where do you not do as well as you could, that you could show leadership on by moving that area forward? What's your company's comparative advantages in energy, and how could you do more to show that leadership? So for us, the question really is, how can you take an area you're doing very well or could improve on, and grow your leadership by and bring others on board, and then bring something to the summit to be showcased in front of 193 world leaders, the world media, and other business. This could take the form of a new commitment, or given the time frame, something that you're already doing that you could repurpose or refit or turbocharge. You could involve other companies in this. You could make it cross-sectorial. You can involve countries in this. As Julia said, we would encourage your countries that you're based in could help you on this as well, or could partner with you on this. And then finally, we can provide you assistance. The UN system can provide you assistance in terms of connecting you with others, or using the UN institutions in terms of providing for the background, obviously, but support. So I think for us, it's really a question for you, a challenge, and taking this opportunity to sort of put something that you do very well and make it bigger, and then put it onto a broader stage.
Great. Well, thank you, George, and thank you, Julia, for this great overview. Very helpful to set the context for the energy track at the summit. Next, we're going to hear from Mike Pierce from the Climate Group. The Climate Group has been driving a couple of commitment areas around energy for a couple of years. Mike, over to you to tell us more about that.
Thanks very much, and hello everyone. So just to confirm where we are from, is the Climate Group is an international not-for-profit with offices in London, New Delhi and New York. I'm very pleased also to be a partner in the We Beam Business Coalition. Our goal is a world of more than 1.5 degrees of global warming and greater prosperity for all. And to work towards that, we bring together powerful networks of businesses and governments to shift global markets and policies. For example, we've built the biggest global coalition of states and regions committed to delivering bold climate action, the Under 2 Coalition. And our work there boosts their critical role in measuring emissions, targeting reductions, and delivering on areas such as clean energy, transport, and industrial decarbonisation. We've also developed an approach to supporting ambitious corporate commitments and action through our 100 programmes, RE100, EV100 and EP100. I'll say some more on that very shortly. Just before that, though, I also did want to mention that we run Climate Week NYC, which is the biggest Climate Week event in the world. And this year, of course, is set to be the biggest ever, with more than 150 events expected across New York City. And we're coordinating very closely with the Secretary General's office to ensure that the Climate Week NYC event programme reflects those core tracks of the UN Summit, which we've started to hear about, enabling a larger platform for more events, and also to give everyone access to have the chance to take part in this huge moment. We can move on then to see something about the 100 campaigns. These are all designed to showcase business leadership on key elements of the energy transition. Together, we have over 200 company signatories for these initiatives. And at the Climate Group, what we help to do is to communicate the scale of action by these companies in key fora across the world, as well as through an annual reporting process, and then a very, very regular daily ongoing social media activity. And we heard from George and Julia earlier on the critical joint role of both energy efficiency and the switch to renewables, and that very much has been the approach we have taken. And so in partnership with CDP, we have RE100, which is a campaign for companies committing to sourcing 100% of their electricity from renewable sources. And then working in partnership with the Alliance to Save Energy, we have EP100, which tackles the key issue of using energy more smartly. It involves a commitment to double a company's energy productivity, the value they generate from every unit of energy, over a 25-year period. And I will also mention, though, sort of parallel to this track, is the work on EV100, which is a commitment to transitioning company fleets to electric vehicles by 2030, and or to install charging infrastructure at all relevant premises for staff and customers. Coming on to the next piece, I want to see this. We'll see how the list of companies that have signed up to the 100 campaigns, and here we just have the list for RE100, is truly impressive. We have, and you'll be able to pick many companies out there that you know very well, covering multiple geographies, multiple sectors. And these companies collectively have a terrific impact. Collectively, the demand in this case for renewable electricity of the 175 companies in RE100 is bigger than Argentina and Portugal combined, and a significant impact then both on the energy market, but also the investment in that will be required to be able to support that growth in renewables over the next 10 years or so. I'd very much encourage you to see each of these campaigns as a very practical way to start making ambitious steps on your company's path, including as a way to deliver against science-based targets. They provide an opportunity to demonstrate your leadership to key stakeholders, supported by our communications of company commitments, and then increasingly importantly, provide a place to learn alongside peer companies about approaches to delivering your ambition. You can see immediately here the sort of network you're part of and the opportunity that can offer to be able to move both markets as well as inform a wider policy agenda. And really my last point is to say, we'll be really looking forward to showcase the latest group of committed companies during Climate Week at the time of the UN Secretary General Summit. And we really hope that many of you on the call here will be interested and able to join this group and be able to be celebrated for the leadership that you are taking. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Excellent. Very impressive display of brands behind climate action. For all the participants on the line, just a reminder that you can use the Q&A function on the screen and send us your questions. We're going to move to the discussion part of this webinar, and I would start with you, Clay. Clay Nessler, you are the Vice President, Global Sustainability and Industry Initiatives at Johnson Controls. You're going to give us an example of how the private sector is getting ready for this energy transition, particularly in the electric equipment sector. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be on this webinar today, and a very exciting initiative coming up in September in New York. I completely agree that the private sector is absolutely required as we address climate change, and the commitment from the private sector helps governments have the confidence to be able to move forward. Three things that the private sector can do. One is they can certainly make commitments on their own and fulfill those commitments. Doing their fair share, if you will. There are also many best practices that many of the companies you've shown and those that may be on the phone today or on the webinar could bring to similar organizations, private sector and institutional, in the countries where they operate. And then finally, a number of companies provide a variety of climate solutions, whether in energy efficiency, renewable energy, or clean energy technologies. That's what governments really need to be more ambitious in their NDCs and their targets. I'd just like to share for a minute or so kind of the journey that we've taken in addressing climate change through commitments. We started in 2002 with the Environmental Protection Agency in the US's Climate Leaders Program, 25% carbon intensity reduction over 10 years, which we met in 7 years. And made a commitment as part of the Department of Energy's Better Plants Challenge, which was a 25% energy intensity improvement, which we were able to do in 6 years. We then tripled down, if you will, and we joined the EP100 initiative or campaign, which was just mentioned earlier, essentially pledging to double again on our energy productivity, which we've done in the last 15 years. I think what we found is a move from national commitments to more global commitments. And we participate in a number of the We Mean Business activities, short-lived climate pollutants, responsible policy advocacy. We're setting science-based targets. And perhaps the initiative I'm most excited about is the Building Efficiency Accelerator, which is part of Sustainable Energy for All's energy efficiency platform, which is 6 based sector platforms driving investment and impact in energy efficiency, which covers buildings, vehicles, industry, lighting, appliances, and district energy. We happen to be the industry co-convener of that, and we very much look forward to working across the sectors to bring together tremendous scale in being able to address the challenges. As we saw in one of the early slides, over 40% of the impact we need to make is in demand-side energy efficiency. In the building side, we already have 15 industry partners, and we're working in 40 cities around the world. Looking forward to scaling that up and invite all private sector participants to join our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. That's a very interesting example. We're going to move on to another sector, and I believe we have Rasmus Skov, Head of Sustainability at the Danish company Ørsted. Rasmus, are you on the line? Could you also please share with us some of the insights from your sector, the electricity sector, and how you're going about your climate change plans?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm at a conference center, and I haven't been able to avoid or flee from the lounge music in the background. So if you can hear that, I hope you will only treat it as a bonus to what I'm saying. Anyway, Ørsted is today a renewable energy company. We're a global leader within offshore wind. Our response to the climate crisis has been to launch a vision of a world that runs entirely on green energy. That is obviously not something that we can do alone, but I think it's clear to everybody on this call that as a global society, we need to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. We can only get there if governments who set the targets and provide the frameworks, if investors who provide the capital, and if companies that provide the solutions work together. I think we have most of the solutions for the renewable energy transformation. And we as companies, we need to show that it is actually possible, and it is most often the economic choice, because only then will governments have the confidence to increase targets for the green transformation. And that will continue to drive efficiencies. Offshore wind is an example of a situation where ambitious national targets and frameworks have brought a renewable energy technology from being a niche technology to a mainstream technology. That has driven down cost to an extent that offshore wind in many markets today is cheaper than fossil-based energy. So today it's cheaper to build offshore wind in many markets than it is to build a new coal or gas-fired power station. It's an example of an ambition loop whereby this becomes a more and more an increasingly attractive proposition to governments. And I think it's an example of an ambition loop of ambition loops that are needed if we want to inspire global green energy revolution. That, as I said, I think we agree that is necessary to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Rasmus. And the line was very good. We didn't even hear the music in the background. I'm going to move over to you, Julia, because we know that all the participants listening are interested to know about how concretely they can engage in the summit, what the next steps are. Is there any guidance available to them? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you, Lila. I mean, we get a lot of questions on process, as it is, of course. It's not a lot of time. We're under pressure. And if you look at the next slide here that we have prepared for you, you see also a couple of milestones until the big summit. So we're at the moment really heavily at work. So a couple of things already up front. Talk to your governments. Look what kind of plans they might have submitted already. Think about, again, cross-sectorial initiatives or any of those that you have seen on the list to chip in. It's very clear as we've gotten around like 80 proposals or something like that. with different degrees of maturity, ambition, and so on. But what's also very clear is the 23rd of September is, of course, just one moment in time where we can put the most ambitious things out there. So it should be a race to the top, and you should take that with you back home when you think about how to do this. The things that Mike and colleagues have covered, science-based targets and so on. If your company hasn't looked into this yet, then clearly missing the train. Get on it now. That's the baseline for doing anything. So when we look at where we are right now, updated work plans, that's what we're doing right now, leading up to Abu Dhabi, where we will, together with countries and stakeholders that are engaged, discuss the plans, stitch it up, make it even better, and bringing the real leaders also on the government side. Then after that, we're heavily at work with making the plan, hopefully. And then we have a weekend before the climate summit where this will really be the place where we can showcase a lot of the good solutions, the good things that are out there. So this will provide us a little bit more space and time, while it then culminates on Monday with the concrete plans and actions. But that's not where it stops, and that's also very concretely put by the Secretary General. We have to go towards December as a first milestone to check in at the COP and then beyond. And this is the difference also to the 2014 summit and the urgency and also the seriousness that the entire UN apparatus as well as the world is putting on this process. So you can see here that's also the moments where you can chip in again. There will be also the high-level political meeting in July and other milestones right now. The Clean Energy Ministerial is going on, where my colleague Ture is at and is working together with stakeholders to pull and discuss proposals. So what to do, if you look at the next slide, open and transparent, one of our key principles. You will see a couple of upcoming webinars on the UN Global Compact site. Get in touch with your governments, as said, to see what can be done. If you haven't done so, again, sign up to the climate group's initiatives. That's your baseline. That's to get your basics covered, so to say. And then I also want to, as we have these cross-cutting initiatives, give the word quickly to Emily, a colleague working on the leaving no one behind, or the inclusiveness of the energy transition. Emily.
Hi everyone, thank you very much. Yes, I'm Emily Hickson and I represent the B team. And I have been working on behalf of the private sector on the social political drivers track of this summit. So that, in a nutshell, is a priority set by the UN Secretary General himself as well, that social elements must be considered across the summit. So the topic of just transition is very close to his heart, and I'll explain what that is, but it's very relevant to what you're discussing here in the energy sector, and of course in some other areas as well, especially heavy industry. So a just transition is really looking at the impact as you decarbonize your businesses, the impacts that will have on workers and affected communities, both positively and negatively. So it's very obvious that as a business decarbonizes, you will start to make decisions that may impact your workforce, and furthermore that will require your workforce to work with you to develop new skills and to remain productive, to allow you to make the changes to decarbonize, to reach your RE100 targets, or if you are indeed a power company, to transition to renewable energy. And it's also important across the global economy that we ensure that we build a green economy that is just, that it leaves no one behind. And that's where we'll really get the societal support and the political will to make this transition. So for this summit, we've identified that as we move into this green economy, as I say, this will impact workers, and it will also be a great opportunity to create new green jobs. So the ILO last summer announced that 65 million new jobs can be created by 2030, many of which will be in the energy industry, in energy companies, or across the whole supply chain. But it's not necessarily guaranteed that those are good jobs. So at this summit, we're asking businesses to commit, as they commit to new initiatives to reach 100% renewable energy or decarbonize their business, to commit to making good, decent green jobs. And we have a pledge that it contains 4 standards that would mean that a company would be creating a good, decent job if they signed up to these things. And this will be sent out to you so you can see in more detail, but they include entering into social dialogue, respecting ILO standards, labour standards that is, social protection and wage guarantees. And it's actually excellent to follow a colleague from Ørsted, because Ørsted signed up to this pledge globally last year for all of their kind of new developments as they build offshore wind, etc. They've committed to this pledge. So I encourage all of you to have a look at the information that's sent out after this webinar. It's a really important part of the summit that we show that this summit is dedicated to building an inclusive green economy.
Thank you, Emily. Another key point to not just speak to your governments, but actually to your employees, because they are a big part of the constituency, understanding the implications of climate change for their jobs, the opportunities also that rely, especially in companies that we heard from today. That's key to having that dialogue. And there will be also an engagement guide for business that you will be receiving. And in the next slide, you can see this is specifically on the energy transition track. You have our email addresses from our colleagues and so on. If you want to reach out with something concrete, actionable, and very ambitious. You can also join in, of course, any of the stakeholders and initiatives that already exist. That's actually what we recommend, because it's not about building new initiatives, new kind of things that we have to just start up, but actually rather accelerate the areas that we already know of and that we have started to work on to take action that's needed now. So that's the leadership that we are looking for. And to sum up, the ticket to the summit, to quote the Secretary General, of course, is to come with a plan and not with a speech. It needs to be tangible and immediately. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We're getting to the end of our webinar session today. Thank you to all the speakers. Excellent insights, lots of practical information, how to engage on the summit. Please make sure you review the private sector engagement guide, which will give you lots of details about how you can be part of this milestone. As you've heard, we really count on every one of you. We need the bold leadership of the private sector to make this transition a reality, and we don't have a lot of time. So we invite you all to make climate action your priority. We will be all here to support you as we prepare for in the next couple of months for this summit. We will have another webinar for one of the other tracks of the summit on nature-based solution actually next week on Tuesday, on the 4th of June. So we invite you all also to join that. Our teams will be in touch with all of you if you need any support, any questions in the follow-up to today's webinar. And we would like to thank you all very much for being part of this. And with this, we can close today's session. Bye-bye, everyone.